Hi, I'm Jill from KiteCo, and today it's so fun to be sewing a part of the sewing marathon. We've done a few of these now, and it's always amazing to see how people make these patterns so differently. So today we are sewing my sander. So this is Sander from KiteCo. This is the medium crossbody, and that comes in the medium and the small, and it comes in a sling and a crossbody. So I have hacked it up, of course. I have put a zipper overlay on the back with these cute little reinforcing tabs. The person this is for just loves a bit of hardware, so I've added extra rivets wherever I could. So it also has my new Had Matter my new Mad Hatter sublimation print on the front. Now they'll all be on my website in a couple of weeks. So this pattern opens completely at the top, so there's no overhang, wide opening, so you can dig your hand in there and find everything you need. So it is a fun mate. It's very, very quick. If this is the first time to my channel, please do consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up, and drop a comment down below. Do you like this pattern? How would you make it up? Let me know. Anyway, let's get on and sew this now. So today we're making the medium size crossbody. So there is the sling option, but I'm making the crossbody and I'm not putting the flap on it. But I am putting a small zipper outside pocket on the back. So I have made an extra overlay. Now it's small, but it's designed for a phone or for sunnies. So both of those are interfaced. I have got my front pocket. I'm not putting the flap on today, so this is a sublimated print. And I've got my lining. They are both interfaced. I have got my tops and my main. Now I'm using a very thin fleece today instead of Decavol Light because the person I'm making for this for likes a more slouchy look than a structured one. And then inside I've got my two slip pockets with their trims and my linings. Both of those are interfaced. Now, piece G. If you are using a non-fray like vinyl, leather or cork, fold that in half at the line and cut it at that. If you're using a cotton woven or something that frays, cut it at the full width. And as you can see, I spilt my water on this when I was cutting it. That's great, isn't it? Then I've got my two zips, one for my overlay pocket and my main zip. So as far as hardware goes, this bag's going to be quite, she likes hardware, so I've gone with really big chunky swivels, going with a simple slider as opposed to an adjustable one, and fairly big 1-inch D-rings. I normally use 3/4 or smaller, but she likes hardware. So I've got my bag tag and a couple of zipper pulls, and I will be using quite a few rivets. So let's start with our tag. If you're putting a tag on it, there is a place or a location in the pattern that I suggest for that. But if you're using a sublimation print, you might want to tie that in with your print. So I'm going to put it just under his face there, so it's like, or you can put your tag somewhere else completely if you prefer. Now I always put a bit of Decavol Light on the middle of mine because it would be horrible if your tag were to pull your fabric through for some reason. So that's my center point. So you can fuse a piece on here if you want, but I'm just going to glue it. So that's our tag. Now as you can see, I've got white around the edge. Now if you're doing sublimation, I do that so that I can keep as much of the print as I can. So now we want to take our lining facing and put it right side together. Now what I do here, because we're wanting to come down at a straight line, is just draw a bit of a straight line there and there, so that you can see when you come to it, you know when to pivot, because it can be difficult to get where you need to pivot with your machine foot in the way. So what we can do now is down here, around the top, down, then starting on both sides, down, and we're leaving a turning gap in the middle. So down there to the turning gap and up there. Right, trim our corners. Now we want to sew around the curve. what I do here is I cut into that notch. And I actually trim around there with my pinking shears. So then I just trim around the very edge, not coming too close because you don't want to cut your seam. But you do get a much nicer finish on your turn. If you don't have pinking shears, just put little V's towards the seam. Let's see if my rubbish bin is lined up today, shall I? Yep. But now we want to turn our pocket. Get your fingers in there and give those a good little push out. Now I try and get my thumb up as far as I can into the gap. Now this is a bit tricky on the small side, so on the smaller size. Sometimes English is difficult. Words are difficult. Okay. Let's use a pen that's not sharp, shall we? And push out the corners. Oh, that's better. Now make sure when you're doing this that it's completely out, that the seams are not under in any way. Put a clip on the top. Now if you're using a fabric you can press, it's a good idea to do that. Now if I'm using like a check lining or a stripe lining, you can actually allow it to put a bit of a peek through, and it actually can look quite cool. It looks like a little bit of piping, but I don't want much of this at the top. So we're going to top stitch around that top edge now. As I said, making sure that point is out flat. And it does look nice, actually I'll show you on the back, if these are coming to a straight point and then around, as opposed to curving from there. So we want to turn our pocket under, which is quite good. I've got a sewing line because I stuffed up, so I can see exactly where that should go. This fabric I'm sublimating on is a really nice thick one, but it's not as easy to turn under like this. Okay, so that's our edge. Now I have seen people glue that edge together before they put it in their pocket. I don't think there's any need to for this size. I'm just going to open that out and finger press that seam a little bit. Then we are going to get a back exterior. I normally cut all my centres when I cut, but I didn't this time. So we're going to line that up to the top. Actually, I don't really need the board because I'm going to line it up with my little ruler, because that should be 1 inch from either side, or either side. I don't know, what's correct? Let me know in the comments, either or either. So I'm just going to check that as I sew to make sure that stays at the same on both sides. So we are going to sew around the edge of that. Now make sure these pieces here don't pull in. They tend to pull in. You have to sort of give them a bit of a pull to make sure this edge is straight. So that is our pocket. Now if you're putting your flap on, it should sit just inside there. It shouldn't be on top, it should just be inside. Yep, that's perfect. It's on there now anyway. So now we take one of our tops. Now you will find, now I have done this with my pinking shears, just so that it's on the very edge. One edge is slightly curved. Now keep that as the top for your zip. So you want the other edge to be on there. And we're going to sew along that edge at the 10mm or 3/8 of an inch. Oops. Now simply lift that one up. Now these are, no, it's not even worth trimming. Now notice these seams on this are different ways, so be careful, check them when you're sewing them. So that is our front, which I quite like the feeling of fleece on that. Let's get our back. Now because I'm putting the zipper overlay on, this is going to be a little different. So I've got my two linings, my zip, my little centerpiece, that's out of there. And I want some double-sided tape. And again, mark our centers. Go away. Do like the rubbish. Now this overlay is quite narrow because it's going in a very little area. And I want it as close as I can get it to the top. Should have all this outside my seam. I don't like sewing over double-sided tape if I can help it. So again, I think I've cut that to have the 1 inch on either side. Yes, I have. So I've got, let's put it at 3/4 of an inch. And stick one little end like that. So it's hard for you to see, I guess, with the black, which makes it a bit difficult, but I'm coming down 3/4. So this is not in the pattern, so if you want to put one on, by all means do so. Now if I had this planned where it was going to go, I would cut out that gap in the middle. So what we're going to do now is sew right around the very edge of that. So around the edge of the outside rectangle, fairly close to the rectangle. Now because I'm sewing black on black, I'm actually going to back stitch rather than pulling my tags through like normal. So now we want to cut out the hole on the inside of that. This vinyl's a little bit thin for overlays, but never mind. So get underneath your overlay and clip into the corners. Like that. Now I can see where my overlay is underneath, so I'm just cutting along the edge. So now we'll prepare our pocket. Zipper overlay pocket. This is always the wrong way. We're keeping our zip up the right way on the right side of our fabric. I know it seems wrong, when I say that every time I do one. Let's see, how's it? Now, we want to simply lift that up like that, turn it over. So again, the zip, the right side of the zip is on the right side of the fabric, lining up our layers underneath. So our pockets are level. Open up your pocket like that. Now you can just leave that, but I like to put those down flat. It makes it easier to put it on. So I just run a bit of stitching or row stitching down each edge. Don't forget to melt the end of your zipper. That's coming undone already. Get one of your zipper pulls. Now I like mine opening or closing to the left. Again, some double-sided tape. Now put it just over the seams, and I keep it out of those ends because you're just going to pull it off those ends anyway. Now I just take one off at this stage. Now I want it, as I said, I want it closing to the right, so I need it that way. Now I just put my fingers in behind, and you can see where it's going to line up on the edge of the zipper. Now if this takes you 20 goes to get it level, then use them. Okay, so what we're going to do now is cut this little piece of vinyl in half and put it in here with the wrong side facing up. So you're just slipping it in the gap out here like that with the wrong side up. And make sure it's level in there. So now we're going to sew around the inside of that box and over there, catching those little pieces in the side. For now, we're going to look at our zipper pocket at the back. So we head them up like that for sewing, pull them down, and you'll notice one is now longer than the other. So don't cut the back, lift that away so that you're just trimming it next to the other one, like that. Lift that back so that you can sew down there. So you want to sew down there, along the bottom, and back up to the top. Now making sure those little bits of vinyl stay in like that. Right, so that is all done at the back. Our pocket is all secure. You can get in there and there's no holes. So what you want to do now, pull these back at the side, not too tight, just so that they actually look nice if they've got a little bit of flex. And we're going to put a rivet. I'm going to put it in there, so it's just missing the stitching. Now you can put one out here as well if you want, but we're fairly close to the seam, so I'm going to give that a miss. Right, so you can see there, I've just put a rivet in. Then you want to trim very carefully in a straight line a little bit away. So that's what they look like. I think it just adds it's a good way just to add a little bit of more bling to the edge of our pocket. So what we want to do now, like the front, is get our back. We want to take our tabs. So, yep, that will do. So I might cut that in half. Now I like a bit of Decaville down the middle of my loops. So we're going to cut this in two, so just down the middle. If it was long enough, I'd do it the whole way. Piece of double-sided tape. Now if you are using thinner hardware, you'll want to adjust the width of this for the hardware. So this is designed for 1-inch hardware, so it is should be 50 centimeters, 50 millimeters. So just fold that into the middle. So it should be 2 inches. So it should be, if you're using frame fabric, it should be 4 times the width that you want. And then fold that into the middle. Now this one you want to be meeting up nice and tight because we're going to leave that raw on the inside. So now we're going to stitch down either side of that. I'm going to do that at 6 mil. Now we're going to cut that in half and find our D-rings. These are pretty solid D-rings for a little bag like this, but I shall go with what the customer wants. Now this is going to stay open like that. You can either sew up there and across and down, you can put a rivet in there, or you can just leave it completely the way it is. I'm going to put a rivet in later when I do the rivets at the bottom, so I'm just going to clip the bottom of that for now. So what we're doing now is we are coming along an amount and down. So we are coming in, you probably can't see this, 1 1/4, we're putting them that way and we're having them up by 1/2 inch. So that's where that is going to be. Don't be tempted to put them too close to the end, and you'll see why as we go through the bag. So we want 1 1/4 and 1/2, or a little bit more than 1/2. Actually, they're coming just to the end of my overlay, which works quite well. Now make sure they are definitely level and baste those in place. And it does pay to baste them because it's easy for them to move. Right, making sure they stay down flat at our beat. Now remember, the curved edge is not the edge we're attaching at this stage. And clip that in place. Little piece of webbing that I use is a hump jumper, because these straps going over these D-ring tabs can be quite thick. Make sure it all stays flat. Now this is different to the other side. This time we want to turn this up like that. So our top stitching is actually the different way on both of them. And there is a reason for that, and you'll see at the end. So top stitch along there. So what I'm going to do now is put a rivet in each of those. Now, because we've got the zipper overlay here, they are going to be a bit closer than I wanted. And you can put a rivet in there, but I'm going to leave that open. Actually, she wanted lots of hardware, didn't I? So I better put some more bling in it. Better put a rivet in there as well. So as you can see, I've put my rivets in. I've put one underneath. Now this one here is not attached, because if it is, you're putting too much pressure on this piece of the bag here to hold the weight of the bag. This way it's coming through the seam and that rivet there. So that's our back and our front. Let's put those aside and work on our linings. And take our credit card pocket, right side together, so your top edges are lining up, and sew down either side. And when I do that, I just snip the very corner off as well. And both at once. Again, right sides together. As you can see, I only interfaced half of this pocket. Fingers in the corners, push those out. And I'm missing that fingernail, so it's not as easy. Now don't pressure them out too much. Now it's good just to put a bit of pressure against that seam. And baste along the top. Trim any little nasties like that. Try and do all my pockets like this now if I can. It's just so much neater and easier than having it all the way around or stitching all the way around. Get some double-sided tape. Now you don't want to come to the edge because you're going to be sewing along the edge. So if you keep your tape in the middle, and these are too long, never mind. Now put that so that it's just under halfway onto it, level like that. So then you want to fold that to meet the bottom bit all the way along, like that. And that should be equal both sides. Now if you don't normally sew in vinyl, I suggest getting a couple of bits of thin vinyl, again halfway. And just keep them for these because it just makes your pockets look, well, I think it makes your pockets look really cool. And I think it's easier to sew than having to turn it right through and leaving a turning gap. Now, if one side is shorter, like that one seems a little bit shorter than that side, sew on that side so that you're catching both sides. And when you start, make sure you start with your needle on the actual pocket piece, not out here because you're going to trim that off. So we're just going to trim along the edge like that, but don't catch the pocket underneath. And cut any vagrant ends. Actually, that one needs to be a bit closer. And that's our pocket. Let's do the same with this one. Now you can sew past those and put a rivet on the outside, which looks quite cool. But on a small bag like this, I'm not going to be doing that. Fold these in half to get a crease mark. Now the person this one is for does not want a credit card slot, she just wants 2 simple slip pockets. So that's exactly what we will do. Fold them in half, so then you can see where it lines up. Now there is a measurement for these in the pattern, but I was doing this as a credit card slot, but then she didn't want it. So I'd already interfaced it. So now we're going to sew around the edge of those. Now you can pin those in place, or you can just eyeball it as long as you're holding it straight and even. So make sure you backstitch well at the beginning and the end, because there's nothing worse than your pocket starting to come away at the top. So that's one of our pockets. So if that was a credit card, if we were doing it as a credit card, we would have sewn down there to the middle, up there, back down, along and back up. But this one I'm leaving like that. Okay. So that is our 2 lining pockets. So we should put those aside for now and prepare our zip. So we have a length of zip, mount the ends. Now we want to open the end and just turn it over like that. So get your fingernail in there and turn it like that. Now there's so many ways of doing this. You can melt this, you can glue it, you can do whatever you like. If I'm preparing them beforehand, I will glue it because the glue needs to be dry, but it's just as easy to grab a needle and some cotton and just do this. Now trust me, I'm not a hand sewer. I do not like hand sewing, and I think this is probably about the only thing I do if these days. I used to do a lot of embroidery, but I don't like hand sewing, general hand sewing at all. Oops, then you get it around the end like that. Doesn't have to be pretty. This is going into the seam. You're never going to see it. Right, so that's how we have our zip, like that. Then we want to take our bang bang crash exteriors. Now this is a bit awkward with a really dark fabric because we want to do some markings. So maybe I can do some in tape to show you where they're going to be. So we want to mark 3/4 of an inch. Now this tape's going to stick to me from that edge. So that's 3/4 of an inch to there. So we want the same side at the back. So we want 3/4 of an inch from that side as well. So 3/4 of an inch is to there. Now I suggest using 3mm tape for this, but if you haven't got any, you can use some thicker. The reason being we are going around this curve. So get some tape, start it exactly where your mark is, there like that, and come up around the curve into the end on both pieces, holding your D-rings out the way. Now if you've got some way of doing so, I would clip your D-rings back because they are going to be in the way a little bit, and stop that right on that mark. But they're not long enough to slip in my pocket. Okay, so we'll work on the front first. take your tape off. Now zip right side together. We want to start it so that the edge of our zip is right on that mark. So it's like that, right on the edge of the mark. And just follow along on the tape on your curve. Now it is a very gentle curve, so it's not going to be a problem. Now you can either baste that in place or you can just tape it like that. Now take your lining. Now I've still got my centre mark in there that I can see. Line up the edges there and clip that in place. And clip along the very end. Now we're going to sew along here. I'm going to do that at a generous 6mm because I'm on an industrial, but that works really well for this. If you want to put your zipper foot on it and get closer, you can, but it is nice to have a little bit more with this style of zip. And so that's our zip in there like that. And I should have taken the tape off because now I've got it sewn in. Never mind, never mind. So what I ask you to do in the pattern here, and this might seem a bit odd because we are going to top stitch this later, is to fold that back and crease up and just stitch right along that very edge. So just a couple of mil or less than a 1/16, just really, really close to it. But enough that your foot stays in place. Now it is a curve, so you do need to keep it out. So you've got that row of stitching there. Now the only reason we've done that is so that when you fold it like that, all that stays down perfectly in the back and you can top stitch down there, but we're not going to do that yet. We want to get our other side, and again, so these you have to hold these out the way, which is a bit of a pain. And line up the zip. You can actually take the zipper off if you want to, or you can divide the zip if it makes it easier. Right on the edge of that and come along that curve like we did before. So you've got that along the curve like that. Again, get your lining. Line it up at the edges. D-rings down at the back. Right, so again we're going to sew along that edge. D-rings down out of your way because they do make it harder. Now don't trim that zip, you need that. Again, just our lining down and sew along the very edge. So what you've got at the moment is your back and your front like that, and that's how it should be. So what we want to do now is bring our two exteriors up together, line up the bottom and sew along the bottom at a 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch. Now open out your zip and butterfly this seam. So open it up and you want to sew on either side of that seam. Now that can get in your way, make sure it stays open. And I'm doing mine at 6 mil on either side. So that's our bag so far. So put it back together so you've got main and linings back together. Now the side that doesn't have the overhang, so this side, line up all these side seams. So line up that one. So we're going from the notch to the other notch. And there. And make sure these seams line up. That's the other reason why we top stitched one way and one the other, so that it nests nicely at the side. So now we're wanting to sew down from there to there, or from there to the other side, whichever way it works for you. I've obviously cut my linings a little bit bigger. I should have cleared that notch off. So what you want to do here, and it does make a difference at the end of the bag, is open up this seam here. So if you can get some tape or something on that and have it completely open, the more open this is, it will make a difference to the bag. So because denim is just a pain, I'm going to actually run a little bit of glue down there. Now you obviously don't have to do this. If you're using a fabric, you can have an iron nice and handy. Okay, give it a bit of a press. But it does make a difference to the bag when it's finished if these seams can be out nice and flat. What you want to do now is fold at that line, keeping all of that open like that. So you're folding that over like that. That's why it's important for that seam to line up at the top. So what we want to do now is make a mark again, or you can just eyeball this, but we want to start sewing 3/4 of an inch in from each end. So you want to start 3/4 and end 3/4. And we're going to top stitch along the top. Make sure your rings are back. So what you've got this side is your double row of stitching, and that side it's all top stitched. So what we want to do now is bring that together and put our zipper pull on. Let's do it the right way, shall we? It doesn't really matter which way you put the zip on, you just have to turn it in the other way. Like that, so that's nice and even. Okay. Leave your zip about halfway. Take your bottom linings and your corner there and just open up your bag like that. So that seam comes out like that. So now get this zip. Now this is a bit strange. Push it out towards the exterior like that and clip that together so the ends meet like that, and clip it in place. It's a bit awkward when I'm trying to work as well. Right. Then we want to come and line up, you can't see the black seams, which is great, isn't it? I'm lining up those two seams there. Now don't remember, one is that way and one is that way, so they should be nested. You can feel when they're together. Now you're going to be sewing from the bottom to the zip, so put your clips on so that you can go that way. This denim definitely comes to pieces. Actually, it's good gluing denim seams down because they tend to fray like crazy. Come back down to the bottom, but again we want to turn it over because we're sewing from the bottom up. This is going to be done in two pieces or two seams. So just pull that back a bit so you can get a clip right in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew from here up to here, and you want to just bring your stitching as far as you can onto that, but don't go past your actual row of stitching. So as you can see, that's as far as I could get. So that's okay. Flip that over. And so from there, now this time, don't let that go flat like that to get closer. Keep it up and down that way. And we're just going to run our stitch as close as we can, keeping it up and down. Right, so you do need to make sure that those are in the same line. So I've gone a little bit close there. Okay, so again, press the seam open. I could go over to my iron, but it's just a little bit easier to do this. And actually this denim is fraying so much, I just want to secure the edge of it a bit more. So now we want to, while we've got that like that, bring that seam together. So you've got your two seams, seam on your bottom and seam there. It's not much of a boxed corner, is it? So our seam open, and our seam should line up and be centered. So now what you can do is you can either put that on a mat and draw a line, but as long as everything's fused right, you should be able to sew along the edge of your deck of a light. Now I sew along here and back, and then I do a reinforcing row, but depends. If you're on vinyl, don't do too many rows. So I've sewn across and back and a row just off it. Now that's called a reinforcing row because it actually takes the pressure off your first row of stitching. And just trim the very edge of that. Don't trim down into your seam. So that is the bottom all done. Now, we'll do our lining. So now we just want to sew about 1 inch on each side of the lining. Again, take our corners, butterfly both seams, like that, make sure they're lining up. Clip in the middle. You can feel with your fingers, if you put your fingernails on either side, if they are in fact lined up. I've got glue on my hands. I was one of those kids that used to love having glue all over my hands and spend hours picking it off. Weird, right? Not so much now, it just is annoying. Okay, so we'll sew across both of those as well. So that is basically our bag finished. So make sure all the seams are staying open. Do not trim this, but what I do is I trim or I round that very corner off. So if you trim that, make sure it's very well melted around the edges. Put your hand in the bag. And this is the moment of truth. Push your corners down. Now when turning a bag, please be careful. There's no need to be really rough with it, and you don't want to be damaging any seams or causing any more wrinkling than you need to. And here she comes. Right, get your finger in and push your corners out. Make sure your seams are still folded over, yes they are, and that they're out. So at this end where the zip is, just to make sure the seams are open, because that is going to make a difference underneath. So you can see where the seam is, just make sure it's open as you push that over the top like that. Push your bag down, in your lining in the bag, and of course you've got your zipper pocket lining too, which is all wrinkled. That's better. So as you can see, you get a nice little V like that at the top. That's why we stop our top stitching there. Which I quite like, a little bit of foam or the fleece in there. Right. So I always make sure that everything is all good before I start sewing up my lining. Now if your bag, if the zip has got a lot of movement in it, you can put a bit of glue just in that point if you wish. Mine's going to stay put, and it allows you to open up the bag completely like that. Right, so everything's going to fit, so I'll take my lining back out. Line up those edges. Don't be tempted to take a bigger seam here than what you should have. Having a lining that's too small is actually worse than having a lining that's too big, because it will pull down on the top of the bag and make the bag look not very attractive. So what I tend to do is sew right from that, as close to that seam as I can, as close to this seam. Then it looks quite sorry about the bing. Then it looks quite purposeful rather than just a way of closing the bag. And make sure you catch both edges. And I give these a little bit of just a zap at the end, just to get any little edges off. Now while you've got your lining out here, I think it's nice to go and give that a press, but obviously I'm not going to today, but I will before I give this to the person who's ordered it. And put that back down in the bag. And there is our lining, which looks much better once it's pressed. As you can see, it fits nice and flat. And the little bit of curve at the top actually appears that the top is straight when it's done. So now we shall do our strap. Now, I am using webbing for my strap. So I cut those at, this person wants it at a particular length, so I'm doing it at 1/35. Is a piece of vinyl. So I want 2 pieces of vinyl. Just in the middle. You don't want it where you're going to be stitching. So I normally cut these about 1.5 inches by about 1.25 inches, because as you can see I'm going to have to trim them quite a bit once they're done. And the other end. I'm doing this on all my straps these days because I actually quite like the ends covered like this, and then I put rivets in them. So this one I want to be a little bit longer up the vinyl, or up the strap like that. So what I'm going to do here is stitch from up here in line with my vinyl, down, across, and then back up. I'm not going to stitch along the bottom. Now I might trim that a little bit so I can see where my vinyl is. I'll trim it closer once it's on there. As you can see, they are both done. I think I need to trim that edge up just a little bit. So now find our strap hardware. Have a look at them, see if one is nicer than the other. I want that one on the outside because it's a little bit, I want it further up. So just thread that through there. And I'm just going to sew along the bottom, back up and around that square. And then I'm going to go across the middle and back. So I don't know if you can see that. I've come around, or I've gone around the box of stitching, or across the bottom, or across the bit, and then across the middle. So that is going to be on the inside of our strap. So I'm going to keep that flat like that. Come up through a swivel hook, back over the top. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different because I want this on the outside. So I'm going to put it through from the outside like that, because I'm actually going to put rivets there and make it a bit of a feature. So all I'm going to do here is sew along or across in 2 lines. Over the top of my line I had before. And then one at the bottom. So that is our strap. Now what I'm going to do is go put 2 rivets, one in there and one in there. So that is our strap. So I have glued, or I have done the rivets like that. So that is our sander crossbody with a zipper overlay pocket on the back. And our mad header print on the front.